I think that it's actually the United States-Israel partnership for a lot of things across the defense landscape has been a pretty close partnership. So, from the U.S. intelligence collection perspective, the United States being aware that the attack was imminent, I think that's to be expected. I don't think that there's anything beyond that. I think the key then is how those conversations went down with senior military leaders beforehand in terms of pretty much everything you do in the military is they call it war gaming, right? You have action, reaction, and counteraction. So I guarantee you at some point in time they came through and said, if we do this, this is the type of response that we can expect, and then what would we do in response to that? So whatever options were being presented, both from the kinetic and the non-kinetic realm, you brought up cyber as well. They looked across all of those to figure out where it is. I think from the U.S. side, they provide their advisory role to Israel, but ultimately it's their decision on what they do. And then from that, the U.S. Central Command commander, as well as other parts of the joint force, then have to be prepared for whatever it is going to come back our way from a United States perspective. Trying to move out the dependence out of Middle East embassies being one of those preemptive actions that the United States took. So it's really a question now as to what type of preparation, what type of indicators and warnings are being put against the intelligence collection community to say, hey, we think they're going to attack, if they are going to attack the United States in any way in the region, how would they go about do it? And then they assign assets necessary to be able to do that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just want to repeat some headlines and also bring in some new headlines that we're getting. The Israeli army saying that, quote, all of Israel is under fire as Iran fires projectiles. We're looking at some live images from Tel Aviv right now on your video screen. The IDF says it identified missiles launched from Iran to Israel. Wayne, I want you to take us through the complicated relationship that the United States has with different elements of the parties involved here, and even parties not necessarily involved here. I'm wondering, given the president's trip recently to the Middle East, the time that he spent in different countries there, if that changes the U.S. relationship with Israel.
Well, it's a great question. When you look at, President Trump went over there and between some of the different mineral deals that he's done across with Saudi Arabia, UAE specifically, for things like gallium and things that China had cut off. I know those were important business decisions that need to be made. They were important critical infrastructure to national security that needed to be made in that. I know that President Trump has stood behind Israel in the past, saying that this is a critical relationship for us in the region. I don't think that has changed. I think that partnership between U.S. Central Command and with Israel, I think is still something that is there. It does create a different balancing act at that point in time in terms of the relationships, because now when you look at it, all of the decisions that he's making that involves anything from political, economic, military, or information-wise, those types of settings, you have to look at each one of those and figure out what we call the second and third order effects of any action that's being taken. If the U.S. ends up providing any type of kinetic response, then what will that do economically? What will that do militarily from a response perspective? Even critical infrastructure, cyber attacks against the United States. So all of those things go into those decisions, and they do become much more complicated the further into the Middle East the relationships go.
All right, we're talking, of course, with Wayne Sanders. He's senior defense analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, with us from Maryland. We continue, for those watching on television and YouTube and Bloomberg Originals, they are live shots of Tel Aviv, as we know that the IDF, all of Israel, under fire as Iran fires projectiles. So we are seeing incoming, certainly from Iran, into Israel following this morning's attack of Israel on Iranian nuclear facilities. Wayne, the United States and Iran were meant to meet for their next round of nuclear talks on Sunday in Oman. It's unclear if those negotiations will still continue and will happen. Oman's government first comments from a Gulf state earlier today said Israel's actions were reckless and would undermine regional security. Other Arab states have echoed those comments, including Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar. Draw the whiteboard out for me in terms of this conflict conflict? Who's allied with the U.S., with Israel? Who is not? Where is China in all of this? I just kind of want to understand the powers at play here.
Well, I know the U.S. has a pretty close ties to Saudi Arabia, UAE, and to Jordan, but those are a lot based off of original peace agreements that have been made in the past. Those are areas where even when I was still in the military, places that you could potentially go to provide some security assistance, sometimes an advisory role. So in the past, those have been areas, those have been regions that we have been aligned to with the United States in order to keep some of the security in the Middle East. Now, some of those things are being upset based off of lines that are being drawn in the sand, and I think that's really where the decisions have to be made by those senior military leaders, as well as President Trump and the Secretary of Defense, is being able to figure out from that perspective is how much this is going to hurt a relationship. When you look at military response options, they bring in the right experts to be able to look at this. And so they're probably going to have a political military expert that's in there saying, okay, if there is a kinetic strike on this, this would be the most likely reaction based off of each of those countries and the relationship they have with the United States. So I think all of those do play a part depending on how much an escalation of force relationship there would be here, right? Cyber attacks or information campaigns and those types of things being more low threat have a different type of response than obviously if there was some type of launch of long-range ballistic missiles or something of that nature. As far as China, I think when you look at Russia and China both, right, from a peer adversary perspective, is Russia's sitting back as a proxy with a lot of Iranian ties on how they operate from a funding perspective and others. And so I think that side is fairly clean. When you look at the Chinese side, there's goods and bads to be had based off of the types of relationships that are being built. And if those start to become tenuous relationships, then obviously the PRC may look at opportunities to diplomatically go in there and say, hey, since you don't have as strong a relationship with the U.S. as you used to, maybe this is a different opportunity for us to get involved.
We're speaking with Bloomberg Intelligence senior defense analyst Wayne Sanders. He's a former colonel in the U.S. Army. Wayne, we're also looking at a skyline of Tel Aviv. To repeat some headlines, the Associated Press reports that dozens of incoming missiles have been detected by Israel. The Israeli army saying that all of Israel is under fire as Iran fires projectiles. Given your experience and just the way that you understand this region, the way that you understand this conflict, is the U.S. viewed by Iran as being, since it's a supporter of Israel, is Israel seen as a proxy of the U.S.? Is the U.S. seen as being involved in this conflict because of its support of Israel?
I wouldn't say that it's considered a proxy, but I would say that any decisions that are being made by Iranian officials and senior leaders, anything that they're looking at, they have to weigh in whether or not this would be a response from the United States. So when they're not going to just launch that and believe that President Trump or the U.S. are going to sit idly by. There is going to be some type of response. Now, whether or not that is done non-lethal means, lethal means, whether it's done politically or economically, all of those are the options that the president has at his disposal. But from that perspective, I think that's one of the key pieces to look at this is both sides realize that there are second and third order effects for any actions that are taken. Even when you look back to the attack on October 1st, the attack back October 1st, 2004, it was 200 missiles that were being shot. They were trying at that point in time. You really looked at the threshold, as you guys were talking to Ethan about Iron Dome and the capabilities of Iron Dome.
Yeah.
And the response times in calculus, as he brought up, 12 minutes. Big difference between that and the previous attack that was a bunch of drones that took over 2 hours to get there. So from that perspective, knowing that those are coming in, the capabilities that Israel has to defend, Ethan. He brought up two different ones. He brought up Iron Dome and he brought up the Arrow system. So Arrow 2 and 3, those are the long-range weapon systems, but you also have something called David Sling, which is that middle air defense area. And then Iron Dome is that short-range air defense capability. And the system is all set up so that you have this nested capability to find out. They can see, based off of their radar systems, what is being shot at them so that they can actually figure out, is it a drone? Is it a Shahed? What is it that's coming at them? They also see a lot of the math behind it that's showing the trajectory of those capabilities, and then choosing which interceptor is best to be able to do that, right? So that kind of keeps the cost piece down. And if it's going outside of a populous area, they may not even choose to use something at that point in time, depending on how many strikes they're planning for at this time.